Convene the meeting of Community Regional Council long-term plan hearings and immediately adjourn it till 1:30. So I would suggest, in the interest of Chair Tolly, welcome Mr. Grenfell. So if you just give me 30 seconds, we'll get to some protocol because we have members of the public with us. So in the interests of full disclosure, I'd just like to remind councillors that the public session of this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Bay Community Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. For those members of the public who are here today, all care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is understood your consent is given if your image is inadvertently broadcast. Also remind councillors that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Welcome, Chair Tolly. Welcome, Marty. The floor's yours.
Kia ora tātou. My name's Anne Tolly, of course, and I'm the chair of the Commission for the Tauranga Council. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk with you today. I'm sure that I can take our submission as being read. I just want to talk today about two issues in particular with you. And the first is the sub-regional financing and funding. So the Commission's basically been appointed by the Minister because of the inability really to deliver a long-term plan that manages growth properly and a failure to do that over successive councils in Tauranga. So we can understand the frustration that the region might be feeling with all the work that's been done through smart growth and the agreements that have been made and the collaborative work that's taken place. I guess the Commission has come in recognising that that's the situation, but that we are, as a sub-region, quite interdependent, that Tauranga can't succeed without all of us working together. And I'm going to acknowledge Bill from my old patch, but I'm really talking today about the sub-region of the Western Bay.
And can I just interrupt you there, just for clarity, the sub-regional financing work that you're referring to is the work that was commissioned through Smart Growth, that in your submission references that the work has not been completed.
Yes, that's
right. Okay, thank you, councillors.
Thank you. I was just going to reference it back within our submission. We've talked about it and we encourage you to join with us on the Western Bay in talking about how we can use our expertise, our resources, our balance sheets, our income streams to get the very best quality of life for the people who reside, who are our ratepayers, and we all share those ratepayers in order to get the best quality of life for them. And to maximise our assets. So in our submission, we're encouraging you to continue being a part of that work. Just as an aside, we are working quite closely with Western Bay, and if we have to produce a district plan, and that's, as you know, still up in the air, we're working to make sure that we are designing elements of that together. Looking towards when there may well be a regional or a spatial plan that covers the Western Bay. So equally important with that work that we're encouraging you to do with us, equally important is that we maximise not only the assets for our shared ratepayers, but that we maximise the amount of money that we can extract from our central government partners. And in order to do that, we need to be speaking as one, with one voice, and part of the mandate, if you like, of the Commission is to model good governance. And as I keep telling to people as I'm out and about, good governance means we do speak as one voice. We have our discussions, we don't always agree, but we do that behind closed doors, or we do that in a forum like this. And then when we reach a decision, we all go out and we support one another, and particularly with central government, we do speak as one voice from a sub-region. So that's the first point that I want to make to you. Then secondly, I'd like to talk about public transport. And look, I don't think any of us underestimate the challenge that's ahead of us as we try to shift people out of cars and into public transport. It is a huge change that we are trying to bring to our city and to some other parts of the region. For us, I guess in TCC, the most important area to model this is going to be Cameron Road and the intensification of the Te Papa Strip. So there's a real opportunity for us to work together on this. It's not a regional council issue only. And very grateful to Andrew von Dallesen for coming with the commissioners on Monday morning to meet with a group of residents in Links Avenue and Farm Street to look at issues that they have. And for me, that really encapsulated the difficulties that we are having with us being separate, because the issues are complex. They are about urban design. They're about the design of our roading network. They're about the way that we handle our school children in particular, but pedestrians. They're about the way that we manage traffic. And they're about even designing so the buses can get round corners or over speed humps. All of those are interlinked. And so we need to be designing them together, not add-ons, but together. And so the suggestion I make to you is, how about we put our heads together and come up with a model where your public transport and our urban designers and traffic engineers work together to design public transport from the ground up. And Cameron Road gives us an enormous opportunity to do that in a way that I don't think we've ever done before. So I make that as a genuine suggestion. But of course, all of that needs to be based on good evidence, and it's no surprise to you that we will be asking for things like, what is the subsidy or costs by route, by time of day, and what's already public transport happening in the city, and what is the patronage by route, by time of day. And if we have that good data and we have our teams working together, I believe we can maximise the investment that the central government is putting in and you're putting into public transport, but more importantly, we can design public transport that people will want to use, and we will start shifting them out of their cars and into that public transport, which we know we need to do. Absolutely imperative, particularly for Tauranga. So, Chair, those are the two issues that I wanted to raise with you, but Marty's here to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Chair Tolly, if I may call you Anne.
Yes, please do.
Yes, I trust that Council has all read your submission, so I will start the question. You raised the issues of working together, and I think it's long been the position of, especially in terms of public transport, it's long been the position of this regional council or this body of governors that we need to do that. So are you up for the debate, the continued debate, and the commitment to essentially co-locate a team of experts as to what we currently probably run, which is experts in different teams?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm putting on the table today. And the time is right for us to have a talk about how that might work best. But I think we do need to have both public transport, urban design, and those roading engineers all working together. Now, how we do that, the executive can, these guys can work it out. But look, unless we do that, we're going to keep what we've got at the moment, which is what I think is public transport added on, and I just don't think that's going to work.
We're on the same page. Councillors. Mr. Crosby and Councillor Lees.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And also in your submission, there's quite a lot about the Wairoa River and the joint management plan between ourselves and Western Bay. And you can read in that, a challenge from Tony Whenua as well to get on and do something. But my question is that also linked to the Tariko West Growth Management Strategy? Is it a continuing of that or critical component part?
It would certainly have to take that into account. Yes.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you. I really welcome your invitation to work together much more closely and to co-locate staff. In your submission, you do mention mode shift and gearbox and issues like that. Are you also extending the opportunity to work with us on the redesign of your parking strategy? Because that is critical to getting people onto buses also. At the moment, it's free to park in Tauranga City. And that seems really weird to me that is making parking much harder to access, because you've got, I presume, they're workers that are parking there now and shifting their car every so often. Because I find it absolutely impossible to find a park in Tauranga City at the moment, even though the parking's free. So is that part of the discussion as well?
Well, it has to be. But that's what we're talking about. We're doing these in isolation, but they're all interlinked. And if we want to affect a change in people's behaviour, we have to provide, as I say, with one voice, we have to provide that design that we're all committed to and we all understand. And it's come from not just a public transport point of view, but an urban design as well.
Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Anne. I just have a question in regards to climate change, and is the Commission, as well as the Council itself, openly interested in having a working relationship between us and yourselves to battle climate change effects here in the Tauranga City boundaries?
Absolutely, we'd welcome the conversation about that. And, once we get our long-term plan sort of under wraps, but yes, certainly.
Councillor White.
Tēnā koe te tio mana o te komihanga, me koe hoki e te ramiti. My question follows on from Councillor Crosby's inquiry around the Wairoa River, and particularly the engagement with the tangata whenua. We heard yesterday from Pirirako, and a pretty interesting part of the population out there and their struggles. So I'm assuming that you've got an engagement plan very much in place. You talk about the partnership, about pulling them into the co-creation, co-design functioning of that part of the world.
Yes, in fact, I think it's next week we're out at the Wairoa Marae, and that's part of the wider engagement and playing that we have with them. So yes.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Martin. Look, you'll be very familiar that we, the collective councils and Waka Kotahi, have invested considerably in WFT and TSP over the last couple of years. We have also been the recipients of considerable criticism from the community that, in fact, the community or communities have not been engaged well with either of those processes. So is the TCC up for the challenge in terms, as we need to be ourselves, to be totally committed to a very transparent engagement process with our communities, because we are in fact trying to change the culture of the city in a sub-region. So I think we all need to be on that same page as well.
Yes, so that's why I referred to the mandate that we have from the Minister to model good governance. And that's why I made the comments that I did, that we certainly have found there's not a good understanding in the Tauranga community about WFT and the TSP. And I have to say, when I got my briefing and read all these plans that have been done, you think, well, what's wrong? Well, what's wrong is that many of them haven't been put into operation. And so from a community's point of view, there's a huge amount of, we're picking up a huge amount of frustration and disbelief, actually, that, you know, all we seem to do is make plans and then nothing happens. And there's a whole variety of reasons. But we only have 18 months as a commission, and we have probably Tauranga City's biggest LTP that it's put out for many, many years. And most of that gives effect to what's in OFTI and TSP. So we are certainly up for the job of promoting that in the community. And we are asking for support from our regional partners to do so. And we will all benefit from that. I think that's really what I'm saying to you today. And we can disagree about bits and pieces in the background, and that's normal and that's healthy. But let's present a united front, particularly when it comes to our communities and particularly when it comes to central government and Waka-Kotahi.
Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora koutou. I just have one question. I acknowledge what you're saying in your engagement with the Greenland in regards to the Wairoa River. However, I want to ask the question. You're talking about collaborative processes with the other councils, including regional council. I want to pose the same question to you in regard to tangata whenua. Where do you see tangata whenua sitting in that whole collaborative approach in the growth of Total One and what we're trying to achieve to make things better in Tauranga? I don't capture that in the other kōrero that you've given in your submission other than reference to the Wairoa River.
So well, at the table is the answer. So you will see that we voted recently for Neighbourhood. Yeah,
And I congratulate you for that.
thank you. But we've struggled a bit with the relationship with tangata whenua, or giving effect to the relationship with tangata whenua, because as a commission we came in and disbanded our standing committees. And the Rangapu had made appointments with a vote to those standing committees, so they were able to take part in the decision-making process. So we're just working through now with the Rangapu what sort of structure we can put in place that enables those that input and that partnership to go forward. Given that there's only 4 of us, so we don't necessarily need to set up a whole lot of committees. So we are working very closely with the Rangapu, as Marty has said. We've continued with the Council Tangata Whenua Standing Committee, and we've had our first formal meeting, and next week we're having a meeting with them on the marae at Wairoa. So we see them as being partners in the decision making and trying to make sure that not consultation, but those discussions happen at a very early stage in development of any plans, particularly when we come to talk around strategies for the future.
Can I ask one more question? Would you entertain a collaborative process for the 3 councils to come together in how they're engaging and consulting with tangata whenua, so that we've got complementary processes across the whole of the Māori constituency, which includes the Western Bay and Tauranga Moana? And I ask this question because we all know that the capacity and capability challenges that tangata whenua have. And I feel that even if we as the 3 councils can collaborate ourselves onto what engagement and consultation looks like across our whole sub-region, so that we're actually joined up and using the same, if not similar, engagement and consultancy processes and strategies.
Marty might want to add to it, but I think really the example of that is what we are proposing around the Wairoa River. because that does create the opportunity for all three councils to come together and put in place for mana whenua a joint process, rather than dealing project by project, depending on whose boundary we're talking about. So that, I mean, the answer is yes, but that does create a practical opportunity. I mean, I wouldn't like to speak for some of the mana whenua of the Eastern Bay of Plenty. Not going there, no.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Thank you, Marty, for your presentation.
Do you want to add anything?
Both from the Commission and from TC. You want to add something, Marty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think just to put this in context, Tauranga City Council is tasked with spending somewhere in the order of $650 million of public money every year. In the last 2.5 years, we've had 3 different governing bodies. And if we go to the elections next year, that'll be 4 in 4 years. And so in order to build enduring relationships and partnerships, there needs to be some stability. And we've had far from that. I think in the period that we do have the commissioners, there's a golden opportunity to have logical, sensible, long-term and enduring conversations to get some decisions that will put things in place that will change the direction and shape and future of the city forever. So we have an opportunity, there is a window, and I'd just encourage all of us to understand what the key issues are that we need to address short, medium and long term and get on with it. So kia kaha.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Right. Next submitted council is Alison Cowan. So the submission returns to page 96. Would you like to come forward, please, Alison? Welcome, Alison. The floor's yours.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and council staff. I hope that you have before you the submission that I put towards the site at Interstation Road, which is currently zoned industrial/business park by Western Bay. As you may be aware, a lot of your staff time has been occupied this year with compliance issues around that site. The concrete processing plant is currently in the process of being withdrawn and exiting the site, thanks to compliance officers' concerns around silica dust and possible leaching, and basically operating without a resource consent. I am a resident of Te Puna. I have a small qualification in permaculture and an interest in regenerative ecology and agriculture. And I look at this site that's been sitting there since 2003 when it was rezoned industrial by the Environment Court under strict caveats for development. And what has been going on the site for the last 24 months has been horrendous. There's been ad hoc, unconsented activity on the site. Local community has been rallying and approaching both councils for over concerns with the site. It's sitting there as a bit of a white elephant. Originally it was zoned to be a rural service hub with businesses like vets and rural supply yards and things like that. Because of the subsoil in that river valley being alluvial silt, it is also zoned by Western Bay as a natural hazard concerned with high liquefaction risk, making it a very expensive site and therefore is not being taken up by those types of businesses in a tidy manner. It's not economically viable to put industrial buildings on the site without extensive foundation work. So that's why these ad hoc leases have been flogged off by the owners of the site for storage, and some of the activity that has been stored by Western Bay has been the concrete processing, which has been hotly contended by the community. As it stands, there's just a grid of hurricane fencing, portaloos and stored items like swimming pools, buildings, huge tractor tyres. There's tyre storage, which has been bailed previously for export, which has now been somewhat minimised as they wait for the national standards on tyre storage to come into play. So I thought to myself, this is going to go on ad infinitum, employing council staff from both councils and compliance forever unless a holistic solution is brought to the site. And I'm approaching you because Western Bay, so they have no revenue streams. Here is a prime opportunity for a collaborative regional botanic gardens and wetlands in Te Puna. The site is previously peat bog. Very little work would be required in landwork earthworks to restore extensive wetlands in this valley. The valley has significant cultural and historical implications for Pirarako. And since writing this document, I have had the opportunity to speak with some members of Pirarako who are very interested in this concept or some kind of concept that would restore this valley to its ecological best and give a chance to hero the cultural and historical significance. We've got the Par site just on the corner of Clark Road there. The Harkell stream itself in the valley has significant cultural value as well. There shows across the country a massive opportunity for a botanic gardens or wetlands in a modern context, not in the type of same context that maybe Oamaru was developed or Christchurch was developed, but something that's up to date and truly a reflection of the community and the history and the site, to do something really amazing. And when I read your submission opportunity, that you're looking specifically at coastal inundation risk, and the forum for that, sustainable building forums. Here is a site where you could pull all of that together with demonstration sites accessible and open to the public for education. The opportunity for partnerships with tertiary and community providers are massive, such as that they have in Hamilton with Wintec, do a lot with botanic gardens there. I know it's a bit left of centre and you're probably, there are so many massive concerns in the community, but here is an amazing opportunity to do something that we multi-generational, would restore the site and the value of the land and create an amazing partnership between iwi, between the local community and for the region. Any questions?
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Alison. Councillors, any questions? Councillor White.
Yeah, I'm interested in Pirarako. You know, we've had submissions from them on other matters, and I'm interested in that level of connection that you've made already. Can you just explain a little bit more detail about that connection? Because I think personally with the Par site and other things, and I'm sure Councillor McDonald's got a view on that as well, is that all of that is very important in terms of the total recovery. So
I've only recently had the opportunity to meet with some people from Pirarako. We have sent emails over the last 2 years to several members, but recently I've had some engagement with some people who are trying to explain to the further Marae Pirarako members what exactly has been going on in this very complex situation where the zoning was challenged in 2003 by Pirarako, and they were offered as some mitigation factor wetland and accessible public wetland restoration as part of this site development. That hasn't transpired. In 2009, sweeping changes in the Western Bay took some protections off the site and swept it under general industrial, where previously it had been zoned rural business, with more, and according to Judge Smith, more in keeping with a rural zone than with an industrial zone. And it's taken quite a lot of understanding for us over the last 2 years to fully appreciate the implications of those changes. And that is a bit of a learning curve. I've encountered people who have very little access to, it's one of those things that people don't alert you to what's going on, you don't know to look. And stuff has been going on down there that is just shocking. The fact that concrete crushing and silica has been in the air for 18 months or so is quite unbelievable in this day and age with health and safety concerns. But more than that, I've become more aware of the history and culture of the site.
Thank you, councillor Nees.
Thank you, Alison. Good to see you again. You mentioned the Daniels property. The other landowners, what are their aspirations for their land?
Currently, the back portion of the land is undeveloped. I noticed that he's been dumping some soil in a pattern that might explain an earth bunt perhaps being in the making. Other than that, it's cattle grazed lowland. There are blocked drains along the sides of Tupuna Station Road, which are a constant problem. Noxious weed. The mowing contractors struggle, but they're only allowed to go down there 3 times a year. On the Overton site, something very interesting is going on. We alerted the council that we had heard that there was toxic chemicals from the port perhaps being stored in that pre-existing pack house. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's something we were told. They have been investigating that, and they are currently taking legal action, apparently. With the Overton, they described the owner of the Overton side, which is on the northern side, as being particularly uncooperative. And that landowner had pre-existing business on the site in 2003, and therefore that should have been the poster child development for the site, with earth bunds, sealed entranceways, and the stormwater drainage being sorted out. But nothing's happened there. It's just some strange container business there. There's something going on in that pack house that's not pack house activity, and the Western Bay won't tell us any details whatsoever regarding that site. But the drainage problem, the stormwater, is a massive issue down to Tupuna Station Road.
I understand your concern, but there's no evidence that they're willing sellers at this point.
No, but with the current legal action, I just see this as an opportunity. There's current legal action on the Overton side. There's also currently an ombudsman investigation into the lack of consultation around zone changes in 2009 against the Western Bay. Whether Western Bay is aware of that, I don't know. It has just gone to an investigating group just a couple of weeks ago, been assigned. But Daniels has tried multiple times to sell his site. Now that the concrete crushing operation and the fire operation is in jeopardy, he has lost his core tenants. It's difficult.
Thank you, Alison. But I thank you for submission, but in just making some final comments, I make you once again aware of the fact that this is a public forum.
Absolutely.
And I think you need to be very careful in terms of putting hearsay commentary on the table that may well implicate or not third parties.
I apologise for that, and that's why I said I have heard and I don't know.
So that's hearsay. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Debs Turner, you'd like to come forward, please, Debs.
Hello, my name is Debs Turner, and I'm here because I care about the climate, I care about our bus service people, and I just spent 10 days in Nelson. It was good, heaps of free fruit trees. They had plums, apples, grapes, and people just pick them when they want it, and good for the homeless to have fruit, making it more fun for the children, encouraging them to walk. They also had parks with a gym, which was good. It was fun working out in the gym, in the park, and made the walk more further. I don't walk too far because of my disabilities, but it was fun. And telling them how many people know them and never got a chance. Oh, that's right. Never got a chance to go there, but all of that, they have a ferry going over there, and it was full of people with bikes, and maybe we could do something similar here, encourage people to live at island. Shops, maybe, which was full of people, bikes and about, some recycling workshops, do some recycling workshops. There's heaps of amazing stuff you can do, keep the plastic down, and about having some competitions for art, recycling artwork. And have you looked into doing short movies about how fun our parks and this all can be? We have so many talented people. How about putting up some positive signs around our walkways to encourage people to walk, and giving children, making it, turn it into an adventure, to encouraging people to walk. Instead of having free bus rides, why don't you make the bus fares cheaper, keeping the rates down? Every time the rates go up, so does the rent. So in the end, there is no free buses. By having free buses to school children, community works where the money is, where is the money going to come from? Are you going to put up the fares for the workers? Put up the rates? There must be another way, which will make it cheaper. Maybe $1 for each child, or community service workers instead of free bus service. These can be paid for. It must be even used. You can't pay 2 fares for the rest of the day. Oh yeah, if you pay for 2 bus fares, the rest of the day is free. If they travel 5 days a week, they can travel free on the weekends. The half-hour transfer is a joke, especially on the weekends. So they leave 7 minutes early. And if the goal line had been 1 minute late, I would have had to pay another bus fare. It's not working. Stop wasting our ratepayers' money running buses out of service, and all of the buses run by a waste of time. Like having 2 buses to Te Puke. Most of the time there's only 1 or 2 people on the bus. The 60 and 62 and 71 go all the way up to Brown Street and then on to Cameron Road. It would help the climate if we stop wasting petrol and give back the bus stops you took away from the sick and small children and elderly. Is this going to be a waste of time for feedback about our bus fares? Are you going to do what you want, not giving a thought and care about the passengers and care about our climate? Take a good look at our bus service. And see what a waste, like running buses out of service. By improving the service, so many people would get the bus and the buses would be more fuller. Right, and stop wasting. People are getting sick of buses not turning up. I had to phone up 3 times in a week, and that happened quite regular. That buses not turning up, buses have been late and leaving early. Maybe it's time to go to the commissioners and ask for a full review into our bus service. You have had plenty of chances to fix it. By fixing our bus service will also help save our climate. If you want to have more people on the buses, start by improving the service so it will help our climate. One example, Mother told me of how she had 4 little kids under the age of 5, and the bus driver told her she couldn't go. She had to get off the bus in the rain, and then the next minute it drives up past her house. How disgusting is that? You wonder why people don't want to catch a bus. And that's not the only story I've heard. And people are getting sick, cut down Pepper Road, people are getting sick of their buses parked along the roads. So why don't you have not so many buses not turn up? So they don't have so many. While looking at your bus drivers, so they don't have so many buses not turn up. Many buses not turn up. When you encourage people, it will help people get more motivated. I would like to finish off by saying, without encouragement, we fail. Without encouragement, we stop believing ourselves.
Thank you, Debs. Obviously a very frequent bus user.
Yeah.
Councillors, any questions?
Speak here.
Appears to be no questions, so thank you very much once again for your submission.
So
You're an annual submitter.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous, but yeah, I got it.
That's all right, you did
Yeah.
well. Thank you.
Okay.
Josh Nagels. So councillors, this is page 297 of your submission booklet. Welcome, Josh. All's yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Josh Nagels. I was raised in a farming family I have been resident in Tauranga since 1976 and have enjoyed a diverse career in mechanical, civil, municipal, engineering, transport, consultancy, design, project management, and solar engineering. This verbal presentation supports my Omni Solution submission dated 18th of March 2021, which addresses the continuing transport deficiency caused by authorities favouring the dominant road transportation model. Overwhelming evidence proves building grandiose roads to be an outmoded, inefficient, and a flawed network, problematic, costly, and yet still destined for failure. Look no further than Auckland's roading disaster. Tauranga deserves better, and it can do better. Let Tauranga be a leader. Fortuitously and geographically, the existing East Coast Main Trunk Railway passes alongside and through main population centres from Amokoroa, Tauranga, including the CBD, Mount Maunganui, Papamoa, Te Puke, Paengaroa, and beyond, ideally in place for the introduction of passenger rail, rural and intercity. For suburban light rail, major arterial routes such as Cameron Road, with its 40-metre reserve width, offer the perfect opportunity to expand the permanent public transportation network from a Tauranga Central Rail Station, which in itself would revitalise the CBD, the Central Business District. Advantageously, the light rail would be the same gauge as the main rail. At selected substations, locations or nodes, connections to the main light rail continuous circuit would be by either pedestrian, short-haul buses or bicycle access. These substations would provide secure bicycle storage for commuters. Main passenger rail, timetabled to peak hours, would also logistically use the marshalling yards at Ongatiti, Dyke Crescent, Timanga for passenger train, rail car, rail bus parking during off-peak hours, for example, overnight. It is a matter of common sense and for the greater public good to adopt the way of the future, passenger rail, and also for the environment and the preservation of our home, Earth. This demands positive action, not indecisive procrastination or flimsy excuses. Today on Radio New Zealand, the midday announcement said about carbon emissions have actually increased overall by 26% in the last 2 years. So we're not really doing much about it at all. However, governance authorities give lip service to being truly serious about reducing emissions, preventing pollution, and lessening environmental impacts. It will be too late when a destabilised Earth reaches a catastrophic tipping point where exponential effects become exponential, irreversible effects become exponential. A radical departure from road-reliant transport and a major mind shift to sustainable passenger transport is overdue. The July 2020 updated transport report costing $2.5 million gave an absurd excuse that Tauranga has to wait another 30 years for passenger rail, till the population increases to 400,000. Now this is a real cop-out, a block by local officials who don't want it, or those who are out of their depth and therefore cannot work out what to do, or they are just plain ignorant of the idea of new ways of doing things better. The fact is, there is no time for meaningless debate. Passenger rail would be a game changer for every facet of public life, for residents, businesses, public institutions, hospitals, the CBD, and it offers great opportunities for employment and future sustainability. Now, with this verbal submission, I have a 10-page addendum to add to it, which is just of general information. It's still being in the photocopier at the moment, and I'll drop it in later, but I'm just letting you know that is the case now. So if you've got any questions, I'll be most happy to answer anything that you bring up.
Thank you very much, Josh. Councillors? Appears not, Josh. Thank you very much. Obviously a very passionate submitter in terms of your understanding of these issues. And we look forward to receiving your 10-page addendum.
Excellent. It just covers a whole lot of background, and we'll probably answer a few questions and give you information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I ask Karen Gilby to come forward, please. Councillors, page 161 of your booklet. Welcome, Karen.
Kia ora koutou, ko Karen Gilby tōku ingoa. I am a kaiako, or a teacher from Tauranga Girls College, and I've come because I made a submission around bus fares and whether they would be able to continue the funding beyond the current pilot project. Part of my role at the Tauranga Girls College is to act as an inclusive learning leader, and that means that I work with students who have high learning needs, a number of students who are requiring things like environment BOP taxis as young adults. They're currently under the Ministry of Education provision of taxis, and a large number of students who are very much on the fringes of what we would call our formal education system. And these students are often in emergency housing, vulnerable, transient, and moving around our community. And while we're located in Pukehinahina and Gate Pa, some of my students are travelling as far as Papamoa on a daily basis simply to continue their education. And I guess for me, one of the reasons for making the effort, to put in the submission and now to speak in person for you, is to speak for the students that I represent. They've had to fight the system already, and I won't elaborate that, you've seen enough in the news, but to try and stop the freefall of their education. And we're working inside school to access funding, support, to have their education come back on track. And we're already feeding girls at school for meals. We are providing uniforms, we're providing Chromebooks, and all of those other things that you hear about all the time. But one of the things that I can particularly see in my role is a number of girls who are what we call long-term school refusers, truants. They have been out of formal education 12, 18 months or more. They usually have a posse of MOE people behind them. There are truancy services behind them, Oranga Tamariki and the Ministry of Justice. And our big focus is on agency and advocacy for these young people. So it seems really simple to ask to have free bus fares for a couple of hours, and it has a cost, a financial cost, but it's incredibly important for a young person to maybe be able to leave where they are living with their current family and be able to continue that education. I'm really concerned if fees are imposed again, how these families and these young people particularly would be able to access their education. And it's just as simple as that. I spend a lot of time doing paperwork for the ministry. I fund, we lobby Oranga Tamariki, we're into Ministry of Justice if they're in the courts. Once they're finished and they're settled, those cases close after 6 months and more. And it takes us probably 12 to 18 months sometimes to turn these young people around. And we are winning, I want to say that. But it's because I can get the girls on the bus for free in the morning to get them to school, to a place where they want to belong, rather than being on the streets. That's it. And
Thank you.
Yeah, the other piece, sorry, just is
There you go.
not to have the free buses during the daytime. Because the other thing that happens for me is that if they can abscond from school and head to Bayfair or Arataki, we're going to also create a city. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
media too.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Von Alison and Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you for your submission. I'm really interested in good data, and you might have this for us. Have you got data on what it was like, what the numbers of truancy was before the free buses and now? Is there anything you can measure?
I desperately wish I could. Tauranga was the last area in New Zealand that went to the model of having user pays bus systems. So a lot of our decisions were kind of made at the national level before they actually got down to us. So you have to go quite a long way back. In terms of can I show you improved access of students who are at risk? Absolutely. We've been tracking those. I've been in a girls' college now for 2.5 years, and we've seen our numbers increase. This term alone, in 1 week, I had 7 girls come in and enrol who had been out of formal education for 12 or 18 months or more. I've got another 4 or 5 starting next term. So the numbers are very real.
Councillor White.
Tēnā koe. Thank you for a very compelling presentation. Every time we hear, the mamai, particularly for our young folk, young women, our young men, it is very, very challenging. So just wanted to ask a question then around what proportion of your students are in this particular situation of, dare I say, special need or emergency scenarios?
Yeah, sure. So inside the Learning Hub, since I've been there in the 2.5 years, we've probably gone from a really small number, but I'm currently probably overseeing around about 150 students out of 1,300. So if you can use that as a ballpark figure, we're probably talking 10% of students that are at risk. And increasingly, a big part of my role is, that's me, sorry, stop there. Talk for 5 minutes. Increasingly, we're working with the families as well. So parents haven't accessed formal education, therefore we have to work with families and engage them as well. So 150 students plus family, I think it's going to be further than that.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question in regards to the free school buses. How many young women at your school would catch those buses if you could put like a guess figure? I'm sure we've got numbers through us, but I just wanted to hear it from yourself. Would you have an estimate? And also, have you heard many stories around comfortability on those buses?
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make, and several things. I'm happy to go away and get you the correct data if that's what you need to support it. We would probably have, I think, in the vicinity of 14 to 16 buses at the end of a school day, and close to half of those would be bay hopper buses that are parked in what we call our J Block car park in 22nd, 23rd Ave. We have numerous buses that are going up and down Cameron Road, several stops, and girls will be pretty much for around about half an hour filling those buses to capacity. You've already heard about empty buses. I actually need more at 3:30 to get them all home. So you are talking all the buses probably between about 3 o'clock through to 4 o'clock being at capacity, just to give you a ballpark figure.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Firstly, thanks for your presentation. I also acknowledge the work that you're doing in clearly a very difficult environment at Tauranga Girls College, with what I think you acknowledge is not always the easiest group of students to deal with. So I wish you well.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Crowler. Welcome again, Glenn.
Last time, I promise. Thank you all. I'll not really address the details in this submission that I made, which was really just supporting a lot of the initiatives that you're proposing. I would comment that in terms of things like the community services card, free fares, I think, when I look at the amount of the investment, I think it seems relatively small for the social benefits that could come from that. With the flat fares, my summary comment would just be that it would would be good to have a really good integrated look at that issue and see what gives the best bang for buck in terms of getting more people onto buses, whether it is flat fares or whether it is actually some other fare incentive approach. And it may need to be different for instance, Rotorua to Tauranga. I'm not sure of how those communities would be incentivised. I guess in terms of my approach to your long-term plan, I see that you're really pushing a strong view around the importance of sustainability, climate change, public transport, and obviously I support that. A lot of the organisations and businesses that I work with support it. And I would say it was an exemplary piece of engagement in terms of actually having costings and having clear details on the website, for people to engage with. I think it's possibly a different matter as to how you go out to the community, but certainly for people like myself who can easily access that website, I think it's a really well done piece of engagement. I think my concern is probably how some of those smaller scale issues, which I think one of your staff mentioned to me yesterday, was probably not a big, sort of game-changing long-term plan in the scheme of things, but we are in the Tauranga Western Bay area, probably at the other end of that spectrum, where we're soon going to have launched upon us through the Tauranga City Council long-term plan some game-changing stuff potentially. And I see, a very stark contrast between the approach that your council is taking and what I'm hearing from Tauranga City Council. And it seems, when I hear what Chair Tolley said, I think there's a lot of encouragement. It's great to think that there'll be support for collaboration around transport. And I think I've heard that before, I believe, from your council and from elected members from that council. I am concerned that maybe at a staff level at Willow Street there may not be quite the same understanding. So I would hope that will be worked through. But more importantly, I'm not so sure that the commissioners, and well, in the case of some of them who haven't been around Tauranga for as long, have understood the sort of underlying issues around some of that stuff. And so Chair Tolley did talk about non-delivery and poor delivery as being a key factor. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. But I think there's even more fundamental is whether the people of Tauranga in particular and other parts of the Bay of Plenty want to see the plans that are on the table move forward. Because if you want to get a low carbon outcome in this region, the plans that are there will not do it. If you want a sustainable financial outcome, I don't believe they're there. And if you want the social outcomes to change, the deprivation and all the other things that we know we're dealing with, I don't see how that's going to be dealt to by the AFTI plan as it sits and the TSP that's coming from that. So that's really sort of a fundamental concern of mine. And I note with interest, and I thank your staff member for printing it out, that on climate change, the Tauranga City Council submission says that they request that regional council champions a regional climate change integration program, ... which obviously a lot of us support because we've been wanting that for a long time. But it's interesting to note that the feedback to organisations like the Carbon Reduction Group, Sustainable Business Network and others was that Tauranga City Council did not want that. So I would like to look at half glass full and think that now things have changed, but I'm again concerned that when there are plans afoot that will not get a linkage through to Rotorua Lakes Council, Whakatane District Council's plans, that I don't see how, and also the plans put forward by various iwi and other organisations, and certainly businesses across the Bay of Plenty. There's just a complete inconsistency between what all those organisations are doing, what central government says it wants to do, what the Climate Commission is saying they want to achieve, and then what AFTI and TSP and the growth agenda is trying to do. And I don't see any way through that unless you can address that fundamental issue between yourselves and other partner councils.
Thank you, Glenn. That's probably a good place to conclude. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Why will the TSP not deliver the low carbon goals, outcomes that we need to achieve?
Well, I mean, it's at two levels. At one level, the information that I've received is that the per capita emissions, which I know, per capita is what in Auckland is being called a cop-out mechanism to determine climate change targets. So, the per capita emissions will reduce a bit, but there's no sort of solid statement about what will happen around the actual emissions, total emissions. But my concern is even more that looking at it and particularly talking to the people who are driving that work, that not only have they not engaged with people who understand those issues, but they have explicitly pushed back from many stakeholders in this sub-region advice around those targets and what could be realistic. And they've also, through their, I don't think the final plan is going to even deliver the suboptimal targets that are there. I mean, I see no evidence. In fact, there is no, I've asked for evidence. I've been told there is no evidence that will show that the suboptimal targets will be met. So let's be generous and say, miraculously, the suboptimal targets are met. Well, that still doesn't satisfy what people out there in the community want. They want optimal targets to be realistically approached and hopefully, with the support of everyone, including central government, that those optimal targets will be met. So hopefully that, there's various levels of this, and I think at all levels it fails.
Thank you very much, Glenn, for your submission. Thank you. Peter Wilson. Welcome, Peter.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I think I've actually got a presentation as well for you guys.
Would you just like to use the microphone?
Sorry, yeah. There should be a presentation for you as well.
Just putting it up now.
Realise that your allocated time is only 5 minutes.
It's a short presentation.
Great, thank you.
Severely cut back last night. Here we go. How do I get that up to slideshow? Good, thank you very much. The format I'd just like to put forward this afternoon, very quickly, some suggestions oriented around climate change, my rationale for those suggestions, references as to where I've got my information from, and a little bit about my background. Okay, there we go. I'd like to talk around the impact of carbon dioxide. So again, I'm talking about emissions. And historically, and this is graphs from the last 800,000 years, temperature and carbon dioxide have followed each other. So we can use carbon dioxide to predict what our climate is going to be like in the future. Looking at that graph in a little bit more detail, over the past 800,000 years, we've had a number of ice ages, and here the peaks are warm periods and the troughs are cold periods. The cold periods effectively corresponding to glaciations. So that rise and fall, as you can see from the scale on the right-hand side, is about 100 ppm of carbon dioxide. And where we are today is 130 parts per million above the warm period carbon dioxide levels. So we've never been here before. This is unique to humankind. And as such, what we're going to face in the future will be unique weather patterns, unique rainfall, unique storms, and so forth. What does the future hold? Currently, 418 parts per million will give us something in the region of 6 centigrade temperature rise. But as you can see from the slope of the curve on the extreme right-hand side there, that's the carbon dioxide increase in the past 60 years. That's going up so steeply that we don't know where it's going to end, which is why reduction in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, particularly methane, is so important. The impacts, map was published by Climate Central Coastal Risk Screening a while ago. This shows the Bay of Plenty area with potential flood zones predicted by about 2050. So we're only looking 30 years ahead, and already we'll see some of our infrastructure and potential residential areas impacted by flood. So in the UK, the experience that we've had in the UK, and I'm fairly recently out from the UK, has been that our floods have been getting a lot worse. We haven't got the terrain that New Zealand has, and it's a beautiful terrain, some very nice hills. We're much flatter as a country. Sorry, I say we, I'm now a resident in New Zealand. So the UK is much flatter from the terrain point of view. Our highest mountain is about 3,000 metres. And we've suffered, the UK has suffered quite severely from floods. So James Bevan has been running the UK Environment Agency since 2015. One of his roles is flood management and flood defences in the UK. So he's got a lot of experience, and he predicts that with the climate change that we will see in the future, we'll get much higher sea levels. He's saying taking out most of the world's cities, but the net effects can be to collapse ecosystems, slash crop yields, and destroy the basis of our modern economy. So it's going to be extremely serious. It's the most serious issue that I think the planet has on its table at the moment. So likely impacts in the shorter term: sea levels a metre higher by 2100 or higher than that, steadily increasing temperatures up to 4 degrees C higher by 2100, extreme rainfall, drought cycles, increasing violent storms, and as I mentioned, we will not have a precedent for this type of behaviour. It will all be new to us. So how can we avoid it? Reverse the slope of the carbon dioxide atmospheric concentration curve, which is where the urgency of doing whatever you guys can do to facilitate removal of carbon. And for example, I've said at the very beginning, my suggestions, electrification of transport. It would be very useful use of solar panels to actually charge vehicles at home. There's a number of options, and my submission contains some more detail. Methane is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, and it's the second most impactful greenhouse gas that we have on the planet. And so methane emissions effectively dominate your greenhouse gases. And so what can we do about methane? We need to look at how we manage livestock and the numbers of livestock, which is one of the main sources of methane. Right. Oh, sorry, let's go back on that one. So references in here, there's full speech from Sir James Bevan, for example, and a little bit about me. I'm a degree qualified chemical engineer. I started in the industry. Over the past 30 years, I've been an insurance risk engineer. So I've been risk assessing, not just man-made hazards, so fire and explosion, but also natural hazards. And that drove my interest in climate change. And so over the past 15 years, I've been personally following that. And I really would like to make a difference if I can, or certainly help. So I'm keen to volunteer if there's anything I can do. That's it.
Thank you, Peter. Can I just ask an unusual question?
Surely.
Your submission under the name of Peter Wilson, yet your CV is under the name of Peter Holyoke.
Yes, Wilson is my maiden name. I actually changed my name on marriage.
Okay, thank you. Councillors. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Peter. I found your submission incredibly helpful, particularly your useful comments with regard to sustainability funding. It also was a very good reminder for me why I'm so passionate about getting action on climate change. And in fact, your presentation made my left eye twitch, which means that you were winding me up. So your the data that you're showing, one thing that worries me is we reach a tipping point and the things that we reasonably expect to happen completely go off out of the radar, and we go and completely uncharted territory that you talk about. So your projections, are they counting in tipping points that may lead to collapse of ecosystems and complete loss of glaciers and ice sheets, etc., or are they just a steady, this is what we can expect to progress?
It's not going to be steady, Councillor. We've already reached the point where, for example, we're melting permafrost, and that's releasing carbon dioxide. There's carbon dioxide trapped in the ice, which has effectively been permanent ice packs. They are now melting as well, so that carbon dioxide is being released. Methane, similarly, trapped in ice, that's being released. So we're getting an accelerating effect. I don't know if you've heard of the albedo effect with regards to the ice caps, but as the ice caps get smaller, there's less reflection because there's less white. So there's lots of, if you like, you can call these tipping points, but they will all act as the planet gets warmer, just to make the situation that much more difficult. Which is why, from my standpoint, the urgency really is, what can we do today to facilitate, help, inform? And I love the suggestions that the council's got to actually, like now, like this arrangement that you have, to liaise and involve and integrate with the local community. This is something that I think is a superb initiative. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Give us more information.
That's all.
I noticed up there, I certainly support what Councillor Nisa said. Notice your experience up there is 30 years international insurance risks, looking at man-made and natural hazard risks. So seems very much that you've got a lot of that connect internationally as well. Your last line there is keen to volunteer if I can help. What sort of volunteering are you talking about?
Anything from liaising with local communities, providing, say, if the council thought it's appropriate to inform local communities to present to them on behalf of the council, something along those lines. Very happy to put myself up for questions. There's a lot behind those references, as I say, that could have been a much bigger presentation. So I cut it right back. There's a lot more information that I can lay my fingers on. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. Clearly, you engendered a high degree of interest in terms of this presentation, so no doubt some of the councillors, if not the staff, will be back in touch with you in terms of your offer under bullet point 5 there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuel.
Thank you. Carol Gordon. Please come forward, Carol. I need no introduction to this body.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman Leader. Kia ora, members. Yes, you know me and the topics that I raise. But it's important at this time of the LTP and a crucial 10-year planning period to remind you of some issues and to commend you on aspects of your LTP. You will have my submission in front of you, but I just want to highlight a number of points as I go through it. I haven't done a fancy PowerPoint presentation today. Sorry about that. So my submission starts. We know we live in a precious environment, and it's humbling to listen to the last speaker and the data that he puts before us. And it reminds me of the next point I make, which is how do we unlock the power of a potentially unlimited community? Here's an example, as other speakers today are, that we have huge resourcefulness in the knowledge and capacity of our communities who wish to make a difference. And how they can contribute. And so I want to really acknowledge the people. You know that I always talk about the people, and particularly the older people. I wish to commend Council for investing in urgency on the climate change actions. and its commitment to improve community engagement planning in 2021. Further, I wish to compliment the Manager of Transport and Urban Planning for his and the Public Transport Committee's commitment to a strategic direction that gives place to people. We've been too long in this region focused on roads. And I say that very seriously. I want to address a number of interrelated sustainable regional planning issues related to the long-term plan. First of all, COVID-19. I wish to recommend, given the points that I make in my submission, that a lead item be written and included in the long-term plan documentation as a lead paragraph to this period of time and this planning period. One only has to look at the devastation that is continuing to continue in research around the world to know that we're going to be affected. We've been very lucky as a nation, and we've all given commitment to that safety that we currently experience, but it's at risk in the global environment every day. So let's be really careful and really true about our people, our place, and our environment. If you want to look, if you believe your role is about that wider environment, then COVID-19 has a place. I don't believe at this point of time that we as a region have done enough in terms of looking at recovery. I've just completed a study with elders on the impact of COVID-19 shutdown on them. And it's traumatising to read these stories. It brings me to tears to read what they said. So they're in-depth interviews of lived experience. And I'd like to leave a copy so that any of you who wish can read that, because it has significance. The key outcome being the disconnect of social connectedness. And our public transport has a key role in that. And you know I've advocated in that area so that older people can have better access to public transport in their later life. So COVID has impact on us, and it will continue to have it in a greater economic way, I'm sure. So there are complex challenges to be met if we really look honestly at that COVID environment. So my recommendation that a context of wellbeing and the impact of COVID-19 be included. That leads me to social impact. I'm concerned that, and you've heard me articulate it before.
Excuse me, Carol. Can I just remind you, you've got 5 minutes?
Yes.
And I wonder whether if you're going to go through each of these, we'll be well over time. So could I suggest that we take it as read, that we know what your recommendations are, they're outlined here, and that you deal with the questions, because otherwise I'm going to have to terminate the presentation.
Well, that's very sad. Thank you very much. So I want to make a point about narrative change, that it's time to shift our language in order to recognise and accommodate the ageing of our population. So given that you've read what I've said and that I have limited time, I just want to comment on one point on page 3, and that is in regard to the growth agenda driven by UFT and the current TSP. We have an ageing population that needs to live close to amenity, and those plans do not accommodate that, nor do they support the sustainability that we need in a changing climate world. So I suggest that we have better public engagement around those planning documents and integrate some of the issues that fall out of that into the public transport review process that's scheduled for this year. So given that you've read my paper, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Carol. Councillors?
Okay, given that I've raised the demographic issue, I'd just like to leave you with a key thread. And that is that in this region, which is the same as the DHB, there will be a 229% increase in the number of people over 75 years by 2036. So that means that planning in this 10-year period needs to accommodate that significant shift in our demographic structure.
Mr. Crosby.
Thank you, Carol. Quick question. Action with regard to climate change will involve everybody of all ages.
Yes.
From your conversations with the elder sector, what's their understanding, briefly, of the climate change issue?
I haven't directly talked about climate change, but I have talked with them about accessing public transport as part of that continuum. Yesterday, I was at a Probus meeting of over 100 people, and I asked at the beginning of my presentation on the COVID impact, how many of them had clicked the app as they came into the meeting. Only a few hands were raised. I then asked them whether they had access to a phone that would enable that app. And 1/3 of the people put up their hand to say that they had a phone. So when we're communicating with people, and I'm coming back to your making the point that those people are disconnected from a lot of our everyday life accessibilities. And so we have a digital divide that does create a connection with the kinds of decisions that we might be making in communities.
Thanks, Carol. Last one, Councillor Nees.
Very quickly, Carol, yesterday we had a submission from Liz Davies from Social Link, who suggested that we have a social wellbeing audit of our policies to measure how well we're going with the social wellbeing. How different is that from your suggestion for a social impact analysis and project development?
Thank you, that's a very good question. The social impact analysis I'm suggesting is that for every project where you do your risk analysis, that you actually have a social impact one that looks at the impact on tangata whenua. You already have that, but you don't do the wider social impact for all of those projects. There's a community one, but it doesn't unpack to the level that we need to, given the social disparity of income and poverty in our communities. Because we should be following the sustainability agenda of Leave No One Behind.
Thank you for your submission, Carol. Much appreciated. Thank you. Melissa, would you like to come forward, please?
Hi there.
Welcome.
So the first point was the where I made any comment was the loans around funding people getting sustainable impact stuff with their house, like solar panels and stuff. The reason that I think that the low interest loans is good because not everyone can afford a loan from a loan shark, I suppose you could say, to help with the environment, and also the fact that there are people out there, like the family I work for, who are struggling even though they have a business. And the reason that they're struggling is they have 4 children, and of them is 2 have disabilities. So to be able to do anything to make their house more sustainable would be excruciatingly without some sort of initiative like that. Next things is the school buses, buses for free for school students. I think it's great. I am a beneficiary. I have a 7-year-old son who attends Gresham Village School, and we live in Gate Park behind the hospital. At the moment, we're lucky enough to carpool with another family that goes to Gresham Village from the same area. But I'm looking at moving soon, and that's not going to be a viable option for us anymore. In saying that, for primary age, I think that there should be a discount for the parent taking a primary age school child to school and bringing them home again. Just because at $3, whatever it is, each way, you've got to school, then from the school to work or back home, and then back to the school, and then home. So that's 4 trips for the parent to pay for. Just for me, it doesn't make it easy. In saying that, you guys said about beneficiaries who have community services cards or just people with community services cards could be free. I find that a little bit of an insult personally, just because even though we're beneficiaries, we still like to pay our way. So I would rather the idea of a discount than a complete free bus fare. And as I mentioned in my submission with tertiary students, I'm from Wanganui, and down there UCOL has for Palmy and Wanganui free bus fares with your UCOL card. But that's not paid for by ratepayers, that's paid for by UCOL. And I've spoken to various friends of mine around the Tauranga area, and they ask, why are we funding things for other people and not using it when we're not using it ourselves? And I do agree with that to some extent. So to have free tertiary students, I think that should be more on the tertiary institutes rather than the council themselves. As for flat rates for buses throughout the region, I just don't think that flat rates is a fully viable option, because you don't expect to be able to get to Rotorua on $10 of gas and also to Kitty on $10 of gas. So why should the buses have that sort of concept?
Have you finished? Right, thanks very much, Melissa. So you obviously put a lot of thought into this.
Mm-hmm.
So councillors, any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just very clear, as you said. Very lived experience, thank you.
Thanks very much, Melissa.
Thank
You did a good job. Thank you. Laura and Mary. You're on. Councillor McDonald.
I've got to express a conflict of interest with the environment.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
They are. I know that. That's why I'm trucking on. Welcome, Mary, Laura. So essentially, the essence of your submission is a request from the Communities Initiatives Fund for $100,000, right? Right, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Chairman Leader. I've only got a very brief job, and that is to welcome, thank you for allowing us to present you today, to apologise for Kana Akuhata, who was unable to be part of the presentation today. It's a last minute change, has messed things up a little bit for her. But I'd like to introduce you to Laura Ragg, our CE from Envirohub, and Joy Moira, who will do the presentation in relation to Wairaki Park region.
So, Joy, we've actually, it wasn't long ago you presented in terms of this proposal, was it? Mayoral Forum. Okay, so yeah, not everybody's seen it, but some of us have. Okay, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, we would like to gratefully acknowledge the Regional Council for the funding they have provided us through the Community Initiative Fund. This funding has been a major factor in enabling us to deliver a wide array of programmes and initiatives that we've developed for our Bay of Plenty communities. Over the last 3 years, we've seen an increased demand for our offerings, and we've significantly grown what we deliver. 3 years ago, we were running 4 successful programmes. 3 years ago, we were running 4 successful programmes, and this has now grown to 14. Annually, we work with over 300 different organisations to deliver these initiatives to our Bay of Plenty region. We've adapted to meet the needs of our communities and the increased urgency regarding the need to tackle the effects of climate change and our part in that. We've celebrated central and local governments declaring climate emergencies. We've seen conversations shifting from whether we need to do anything towards what we need to do and why we are not doing it. And there's now an increasing sense of urgency across the generations, but particularly and understandably from our youth. Envirohub turns 20 years young in August, and our bottom-up grassroots approach focuses on raising awareness of the issues we face as a region, and it recognises that 85% of us live in an urban environment. We provide individuals and organisations with advice and tools to reduce their own carbon footprint and develop environmental consciousness, and this forms the basis for many of our programmes. Our flagship Sustainable Backyards programme has just completed its 16th year of being. This month-long programme delivers a combination of face-to-face events and social media campaigns, with our 2019 social media campaign receiving 173,000 unique views. Connectors in Whakatane and Rotorua ensure equitable access to events across the region. From food to fashion, beaches to backyards, markets to speakers forums, we aim to deliver something for everyone. These events are fun, informative, free or low cost, and highlight sustainability and environmental issues and provide practical steps for people to change their behaviour permanently. Our regional environment network has grown to over 80 conservation, green hands and sustainable living groups throughout the Bay of Plenty, and we support these groups through the facilitation of training opportunities, promotion of activities, newsletters, speakers events, networking opportunities, and an annual regional hui. We are seeing new groups being created more and more. Our aim is to keep those groups connected and encourage collaboration and link into the work that Bay Conservation Alliance is doing with its member groups. Our Sustainable Neighbourhoods project has been working with streets and households in Te Puke and Welcome Bay to facilitate them to reduce their carbon footprint and improve their neighbourhood. This has included native planting, fruit trees, composting and living more sustainably. As well as the environmental aspirations we had for the project, there have been positive social cohesion outcomes, with neighbours having been introduced and now networking with each other as part of the project. It has also led to one of the streets in Te Puke having taken steps to adopt and improve their local reserve. Each 6-month project has created a ripple effect of sustainable living, with small great things adopted by each household having a bigger impact on the community as they share their journey. And we've seen examples of people living in very difficult social situations who are isolated and feeling hopeless, connecting with their neighbours. And it's not just the plants and the trees that we see growing, but the relationships and the people and the neighbourhoods themselves are growing too. We are committed to developing enduring relationships with organisations and individuals to create widespread systemic change and build safe and resilient communities.
Our 14 programmes are inclusive, practical and aligned with the Regional Council's outcomes, and encourage individuals to take action on climate change and improve the environment by valuing our Indigenous ecosystem and our impact on it and our place within it. I will now pass you over to Joy Muir to present on our Iriki Park Region initiative and how that delivers on the Regional Council's long-term objectives. Thank you. I'm so sorry that the visuals did not work. I'm not sure why that is. So apologies for that.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here as part of a duo team between myself and Carla Akelwhite to talk to you today about Iriki Park Region, a new environmental initiative powered by Environment Hub Bay of Plenty, as we've heard. Our mission is to make Wairiki greener, healthier, wilder and more resilient, stretching from Katikati in the west through Whakatane to Opotiki and the coast in the east, and down to Tauranga through Rotorua to Taupo and Turangi in the south. Our roadway encompasses the wider Bay of Plenty. We, however, are not pitching a shovel-ready environmental action. Rather, we are wanting to create a movement to inspire the people of Wairiki to embrace biophilia, the scientific belief that nature can fix us. And we recognise that none of us can do this on our own. Therefore, Wairiki Park Region is being co-designed, including with iwi, to inspire environmental action by reconnecting people back to each other and to nature through sharing stories, knowledge, connections and information. To achieve its overall mission, Wairiki Park Region must be seen as an enactment of the Treaty of Waitangi. It must be able to provide a better future for future generations. The initiative will support all articles, particularly Article 2, and we will ensure this by accelerating good environmental action throughout the region. To do this, we propose to develop a toolkit for all iwi and the community at large, including social and environmental groups. The toolkit will also be available to central government, to DOC, to you, Regional Council, and also the district councils. It will consist of an 8-person team to support and drive good environmental action with a fully interactive digital platform, not website, platform, to enable connection and collaboration. What you see in front of you is the beginnings of our phase 1 technical build for the regional interactive map. The data is fictitious, the intention is real. This has to go through various focus groups so that we ensure we get the right messaging for our the region, and including iwi. We had our first iwi focus group last Friday. We will share everyone's stories. We will connect people, organisations, experts and environmental data together using smart technology for the whole region to tap into and benefit from. We will also ensure it connects to TikTok and other youth-generated and future platforms. We believe Wairiki Park Region will be a way of increasing community connectivity, especially as we continue to find our way with dealing with climate change and the ecological emergencies that we are all facing. In addition, for councils, we see this as a vehicle for you to engage differently with the community and building more trust in the community by sharing your environmental stories, your people, your champions and your actions. Therefore, our submission to the LTP is to looking for support to help us build the infrastructure needed so that we can help you and help the community at large speed up our environmental knowledge and our action and behavioural change that is so desperately needed right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, questions? Councillor Lees and Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Firstly, I just want to congratulate Enviro Hub on the work that you do. Your programs obviously have huge reach and you're a very successful organisation. I just want to be clear about what you're asking for. You're asking for $100,000 a year for 3 years for your core programs and $100,000 a year for the Wairiki Park region, is that right? So the questions I've got is there any overlap or potential overlap between the Wairiki Park region and the staffing and activities of the Enviro Hub, and also who else are you approaching for funding for the Wairiki Park region? I see you've got a budget of 576,000 and you're asking us for 100,000. So I'd quite like to know what your certainty is of getting the rest of the funding.
So we have a funding application in for Jobs for Nature for our regional connectors, which are our human resource that will be out in the region. Obviously, the presentation I gave you was tiny, so that would fund people being connectors in the region. The funding we're looking for from ourselves is very much about some core skills that we need to increase our ability to deliver good knowledge, good communications, good engagement. So they're very specific skill sets around environmental data, Maori engagement and environmental communications, so that we can gather all the information, the stories, build the relationships. So, and for example, the work that Environhub does is directly feeds into that as being some of the stories, some of the actions and the work that's being done. To be fair. Does that make sense?
No, I'm not clear, sorry. It might be just the time of the day.
To be fair, this was such a short presentation that we weren't able to get everything into it.
So we've applied for the Jobs for Nature money, and that's specifically for those regional connectors. The decision has been deferred for that whole fund until May, so we'd hoped by now we'd know about that. So what we're asking for, we don't want to duplicating what we're doing, obviously. So what we're asking for from regional council is what we put in the proposal to you guys, and that is more around that sort of data and how we can deliver on the objectives wider Park region for the whole region.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, just two issues. Just to follow up on that issue, are you not applying to us for core funding?
Environhub is, yeah.
Okay, whilst we're deliberating that.
Yeah, no,
Councillor
sorry,
Lindsay.
one further question on, and I'm going to ask Bay Conservation Alliance the same question. Can you describe your relationship with Bay Conservation Alliance?
Yeah, so we have different spheres of operation, and so we've been working with them on what they do. They feed into what we're doing. BCA are on the advisory group for Wairiki Park region, and yeah, we're doing different things. The environment obviously is a big space. Our focus is more on people and recognising that 85% people live in an urban environment. So the groups that they're working with are delivering on the ground, and we are sort of feeding into that with all the initiatives that sort of underpin that. So yeah, I work very closely with Michelle at BCA to ensure that we're not duplicating, ensure that they're leveraging off us and we're leveraging off them, and that's, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Iriki.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koutou, kia ora, thank you for the presentation. This council is very aware of the enormous challenge ahead of us with regards to engagement with iwi and throughout the region. How are you going about this process, and how are you going to meet the same sorts of challenges that we are meeting with regards to engagement?
So we have specific funding from the Working Together More Fund, which is specifically for our Maori engagement and how we build our relationships with iwi. So we are working our way around the region, speaking with different iwi. We are building relationships. We are listening to what they, how they would like to walk with us from this. So, for example, on Friday, we had our first iwi focus group in Whakatane. And we were talking about sharing between us how Wairiki Park region could be a safe space for iwi to come and share their stories and be able to look for advocacy and comfort and space to build relationships.
Could I just ask who was present at that week in Whakatane?
I wish Carla was here. So there were 3 iwi. They were from Matata, from Whakatane. Yeah, I apologise that I cannot be very, I do not want to do disservice by pronouncing it wrong, so I apologise for that.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Laura, Julie, for your time. Wish you well in terms of your application and consideration. We'll let know in July after our deliberations process. Thank you. Okay, welcome, D.B. Burrell.
Yeah, just do a brief review.
While we're coming out, Mr. Chair, I can't see the second application for.
I couldn't find it either.
For the one.
Debate conversation, I believe that's.
No, I'm talking.
But they might be linked.
Through you, Chair, it's page 1358 is the Iriki submission. And page 1212 is Enviro Hub.
Tēnā koto kato. Tēnei wā ko i te mātou whakaro i te mātou nui te rangi. Nā mai nani tango atu. Kariki mō tātai. Kaya ki te gusta matua kama wairo tātou. Mai te wairo te papapaki nāna wā o karo. Kuri ki te otu i rātau te tātou. Rawa tūnama mai te wairo o hau mātou mātou. Mana hongi te matua te penu ki mai tātou. E te atu nāu i tōna te wairo tātou e puta māra. I whakaako i rātau ngā hau. Tuko mai tō wairo te painga mātou ngā me tika. Hari tonu ai. Wari ki mai e ki tō. Amen. Ki ora tātai.
Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Tūtahi mi hari ki a koe, te rangatiri mō tō tātou karaki i tēnei rā, tai hei mi atu ki a koe. Te tiwi o tōra no moana e tā pu o Iriki, ngā uri o Ngāti Taka. Kei te mihi atu ki a kūtou. Nau mai hara mai kei waimini o mātou i tēnei rā, nau mai hara mai ki te karangotu kaupapa o te rā, te mahere rā wāroa. O te kaunihero o ngā o toi moana. Nō reira nā mai harana haria mai o koutou whakaaro mai o koutou kōrero I runga te kaupapa nui o te rā. Nō reira tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia koutou te wā.
Kia ora.
Ai kia ora tātou katoa. E tā matua, tēnā koe. Nā nei mihi mai ki pāmātou nei karau ane. Nā nei tuku te karaki nā reira. Me tūau I runga I tā. I ngō pai ui nei karaki. Parungarau. Te mea, hua matuku au, ke tū, I mua I a koutou, aro. Ea hai, e hāhua dereke tēnei hui. Te wai I a mātau, e hui ana, he kanu hiki takanu, ka pai tēnei, engari. Ka tū te mihi te tuatahi, tā reira tēnā koe e te rangatira. He hā, te kaupapa o mātou I te rewa. I hera mai mātou I runga I ngā nea nei te aroha. Te rangatiratanga me te mana motu hake. He hawe nā mea. Nā, kua rā E rā mea kia mātou piri rākau. E ai kia mātou, kia piri rākau ngā mōrehu o te hunga kore tuohu. I te wāi pakanga I mātou, I te karaunga, kore mātou e tuohu. Whaituni mātou I nei wā uki, nā reira. Tā mātou kōrero ki a koutou, ahua kōrero pati, engari. kau e whakatere ngā kōrero. Wai ho, we tahi wā ma mātou hei kōrero hei wānanga. Tā puta i ngā ka taonga kei roto, nā te mea. Ai kia mātou, ko tēnei mea, te auha, tēnei te hoki nā ko te rangatitotanga. Koe nā mea nui kia au o tira kia mātou. Nā reira, we beg that you take the time before you cement all these submissions. We need time to have a look at it, discern it, analyse it, break it down and break it into the areas of, we see land weaving along those lines, something very, very spiritual, not physical, but it does affect us physically. Not later. At this stage, we haven't had time to analyse, look through and discuss lots of things. We just ask, we have a bit of time, so we can place those things under our things we know, like spirituality, otherwise, things like that. Nā te mea, ka tangi te whenua, ka tangi hoki mātou. Nā reira, koe ngā tā mātai karanga ki a kōtou, waiho, me tati e tai wiki pia, ai, nā hara mai kōtou ki tā mātou te marae, tā mātou te marae, ki a wānangai. Ki a mātou koe rā te pāhi pai, ki a kōrero ai, wēnei mea. Ka he mātou e tino, kai he ana nei, ngāo. Nā te mea, he wei anō just, he wā, mo te kōrero, te wānanga rāni. Ārera, koe rā, tā mātou ni te wā. So what we want is a bit of time, but we as a hapu can sit and really discuss these things and look at the implications of them, because when land is affected like this, it affects us too as well, as spiritually and psychologically, that in the end, physically, we are sick as the land. So it's important that we take our time. Take our time and really debate and look at these things. We would love you, have you there though, so we can ask questions face to face. Kanui ki te kanui. Koe nā te sikanga pai. Kanui ki te kanui. Koe nā tā mātou i tēnei wā. I te hea te kore. So that's in a nutshell what we'd like from council. I know we're not trying to upset the cup cart. No, just, well, I think slow down a bit, give us time. I think any result, if we don't take that time, things could end up worse at the end. We need time now to think about it, make the right decisions. That's what I'm talking about, making the right decisions. All concerned. I know Māori and the Māori, non-Māori, have a feeling for the land as well. All of us. And we've got to make sure that our grandchildren have this feeling as well when they grow up. They have something to feel about. Otherwise, there'll be nothing there. So that's what I ask for their sake. Our grandchildren, children. I don't know whether it's made any sense, but that's why I've come along to support my sister here in her submission. I'm glad she did. Otherwise, we would have been none the wiser. Anyway, koe nā tātou mātou i tēnei wā. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora no, te tukana hau te kōrero. E karangai, kanui te aroha ki a koe, ki a koutou, piri rātou. I recommend, Mr. Chair, that we take our own moment to consider what you've said. Your presentation is very clear, what you're wanting. Your kōrero is very clear, what you're asking for. And I think it's something that beyond this particular session, we might take some discussion on. I would advise that, take it under advice, and give you an undertaking that your kōrero won't go
Kia ora.
And I think that's the best way to deal with it at this time. So ka nui kia ora kia koutou te whanau o pere rā.
Kia ora.
Kia kaha, kia mai, kia manu, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Thank you. Kare kia whakamuri.
Ai a mātou no mātou kia koe whaetako tia pīga mō mātou koe ki no mai ki mātou ino I mātou matu. Wai o I mātou ina mea mātou te tō takaka kōria tia. Ai, kia ora koutou kauri hea, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora.
Tēnā, matua.
Tēnā koe, tara.
Kia ora, kia ora. Kia ora, tēnā koe. Tēnā. Kia ora. Kia ora, tēnā koe. Kia ora. Thank you very much.
I have a cold, so I won't give you my.
I'll show you in Zoom.
We're letting everybody else talk.
Thank you.
We just need to take control of the situation. So councillors, you may well have got and if you've read the submission, so this was essentially about the Te Puna Business Park. I asked the Chief Executive, what's our role in that relative to Western Bay? So the recommendations and staff are going to follow up on that. And there's Hui of the Hapu, which we'll be invited to, then we'll either send the respective constituency councillors, probably the Moa constituent councillors or our Maori fellow Maori councillors. So we'll follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to
that was great.
impart some Te Kauranga space.
It's fine. Right, Debbie, I presume, is it?
It is.
It is. The floor is yours, Debbie. And just so you know, we had quite a comprehensive submission yesterday from Landsar. And the question was asked from those Landsar individuals, what was the relationship between youth search and rescue? I'm not too sure that we got a very clear answer, so you might like to
address that first. Okay, kia ora everyone. My name's Debbie Island and I'm on the board of Youth Search and Rescue, or YSAR. So just to start by addressing that exact question, YSAR is a not-for-profit charitable trust in our 13th year. So it didn't fall out of Landsar. In fact, some of the members that started YSAR had been members of Landsar and saw the need, I guess, for a youth development organisation. So we're a feeder organisation all about the youth, quite separate to Landsar or any of the other SAR or emergency management sector organisations. So if anything, the type of the students that we take through our program go into all sorts of different sectors, and I'll cover that a little bit off. So Landsar, Coast Guard, all sorts of things. So quite separate. We do get, we are on the strategy for the LANSAR, within the LANSAR strategy, they fund a couple of the courses that our students do, but we don't get any funding directly from them, apart from that. Does that sort of explain it? Yeah. Okay, so YSAR is a 3-year program. It's for 14 to 18-year-old college students, and it's run from by volunteers from search and rescue, emergency management, and ER sectors. As I said, we're an associate member of LANSAR, and we're also an innovation hub for new technology, so lots of the STEM stuff. And at the moment, we're in Tauranga, where it was started in 2008. We've got 57 students going through this year, and we started in Auckland in 2018, and there's 50 students in that branch at the moment. Okay, what's the issue? Basically, if you look at the volunteer report from NZSAR and LANSAR's volunteer report, there's a big, huge lack in diversity in the volunteers and also an ageing population. And that's probably the main one, is that, and if any one of you have been involved with LANSAR or Coast Guard or any of those, you'll know that the most of the volunteers are of an older age group. So what we're trying to address is getting people involved into volunteer work within the within the search and rescue and emergency management sector at a young age, and through the program that we have, which is really, really comprehensive. It takes them through lots and lots of practical stuff, and at the moment we get no national funding at all, despite meeting all the criteria and having applied many times. We do get funding from different organisations locally, businesses and so forth, and small little bits and pieces here and there. We develop youth, so we inspire and prepare them into moving into the volunteer roles. We're a feeder organisation, as I mentioned. 6 of the current LANSAR members in Tauranga are ex-YSAR students. Other ex-students are in the police, SAR, and all these other ones, Department of Conservation, Otani Wainuku, Kiwi Trust volunteering, Waihi Beach, weed locating, all sorts of different things. So, and a lot of our volunteers also seek careers within the emergency sector. We also address a lot of the shortfalls in gender and ethnic diversities that you find within the volunteer sector. 70% of the Auckland branch are actually female at the moment, which is amazing compared to, I think, 20-something% of most volunteer organisations. And we have multiple nationalities represented. The other thing we do is in alignment with the rest of the sector. So, as I said, we're embedded within LANSAR. We work with police, fire service. We have all our students go out and actually participate with the Coast Guard and so forth. Why grow? So what we're trying to do is grow beyond just Tauranga, and we are trying to grow nationally, but first of all in the Bay of Plenty region. So Okoriki, Rotorua, we have had students that have joined us from Rotorua where their parents have driven across, but we think that there is room for opening up other branches in those areas. And the opportunities for students and young people to get involved in this is just amazing to see what comes out the other end through this. The reason for going Bay of Plenty is we are all local, all the board and so forth, but also we've got existing leadership, we've got the ability to support that growth and cross-training and so forth. We have had interest from other groups, so at the moment we represent 32 secondary schools across Auckland and the Bay of Plenty, and we also have interest from the likes of Scouts, Air Cadets, LANSAR and Coast Guard. So we do have the opportunity, I guess, for this to become a national model, whatever we do within the Bay of Plenty region, and it just seems like a great place for us to further grow what we're trying to do. So what do we need in brief? Funding to provide more robust systems and processes. So yes, we are doing it and have been doing it well, but on a small scale. And as you are all aware, in order to scale to anything larger, we do need that investment in our systems. We are dealing with youth, so there's all sorts of factors around that. And yeah, just support for enabling new branches within this region, closer relations with civil defence. And as I said, yeah, the Bay of Plenty could be a model for national youth development and emergency management. And we weren't asked for a figure, but we figured we might as well say something. So it would be, you know, we would like to look at something like 150,000 over 3 years.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Councillor Winters.
Hi Debbie, you said your students are for 3 years. Do they come out with any formal qualification at the end of 3 years?
They come out with the qualifications that they get from us. We are looking at aligning that with NZQA. They do things like Coast Guard, skipper's licence, Landsar, put them through some of their courses. So they do have some of those that are in, complete alignment.
So they're doing modules as they go?
Yes, yeah. And it is in fact, one of the systems we're developing is a pretty robust learning management system that could be rolled out within schools, for example, if they wanted to take on that material.
Mr. Clark.
Yeah, expansion into the Eastern Bay, how are those plans coming together?
Well, that's part of the whole systems and processes. Basically, we're working on what we call YSAR in a box, which is coming up with saying, this is the type of model that we want. We're doing it in total. We could easily expand into any other region. So it's a matter of coming up with the leadership in those places, which quite often comes from other volunteer organisations like Landsar. So Eastern Region would be looking at some of the police, Landsar, Coast Guard, and helping, because it is volunteer run, having some of those people become our leaders, those and parents.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so it's a youth-based thing where you've said more schools. So what's your relationship like with alternative education providers? Because obviously alternative education is largely like decent demographic of people who they struggle in school and still sit in that age bracket. So what's your relationship like in that area?
To be honest, I actually don't know terribly much about what our relationship is in that area. I totally agree we should be addressing it because we're not closed to a school or it's incredibly diverse. I think it's a great thing that we should be looking at.
Right, thank you, Debbie. You've satisfied all the queries.
Okay.
Presentation, and I said thanks for giving us some clarity around the relationship between Landsar and YSR. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, welcome Michelle. Also, I see with you, Michelle, you've got Julian. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Hi. So thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you this afternoon. So you will have noted that our submission focuses on our role in working with volunteers and helping to transform that model and the role that we play in intergenerational pathways and nature education. So just a little bit of a reminder of our role and purpose. So our vision is a healthy environment benefiting nature and people. And our mission is to support, sustain and grow community-led environmental restoration and nature conservation. And the evolution of BCA, we talk about the desire to change the paradigm, to ensure that there is more collaboration across the sector, that there's more resourcing and support, and to really enable the sector to achieve more environmental conservation outcomes over time. Just to highlight that we are now operating Bay of Plenty wide, so we now support 19 member groups and certainly have a belief that that will continue to grow. Our largest expansion over the last 12 months we've seen in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, so now members across Rotorua, Whakatane and the Tauranga districts. As you heard from our previous speaker, it's time to give back to the land, and we think that volunteer groups, iwi and hapu, know that well. So how can we empower and enable them to achieve more? So I'm just going to highlight some of the key enabling outcomes that BCA is already active in that we highlighted in our submission, and some of those areas that the Regional Council may consider to partner further with us on. The first of which is about combining professional operational support to those volunteer groups. And this has been a huge aspiration of ours from our inception. And only last year we managed to obtain enough funding to employ 1.5 operation manager roles. one sitting in the Eastern Bay, Wayne O'Keefe, and one sitting in the Western Bay, Emma Cronin, and they are now the go-to people for our 19 member groups. So whatever support they need, whether it be strategic planning, whether it be, the sort of the regulatory requirements of toxin application processes, or how do we find more volunteers, we have go-to people to support those groups now. And we wanted to do some more thinking around what paid role capability should sit within some of those bigger groups, particularly the groups that have the greatest opportunity for impact. And we certainly see through our liaison with groups that have created some paid employment within those groups, which sometimes presents an opportunity for existing volunteers. They're able to achieve more and they're able to lighten the load on the base of the volunteers so that they can do the core work in the field. Another core enabler and another core concern that we hear from our groups is how do we find funding to continue and grow our outputs and our role. And this is an area that BCA has already been focusing quite considerably on. We now undertake combined funding application processes with both TECT and Bay Trust. That's been leveraging hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last couple of years, and it means that those member groups don't need to undertake the administration task of, say, a 20-page application. We do it on their behalf, and they help them with the report back, and those funders say that through the credibility of BCA, they have greater assurance that it's a good investment that they're making. But we really feel that this is an area we can potentially do more in, and we're reviewing our strategic plan at the moment. We have a 4-day workshop this coming Thursday, and one of the things we're looking at is whether we become a fund holder for big picture projects. And just an example that I included in our submission, as a pilot, we agreed to submit a Jobs for Nature funding application a couple of months ago on behalf of KEEP, which is the Kokako Ecological Expansion Project. There's some amazing players sitting around that table, including yourselves, iwi, agencies, community groups, and it's an opportunity to create a wildlife corridor between Ōtaniwanuku and Kaharoa. That group could not apply for funding on their own. We have agreed that we will apply on their behalf, but of course that puts the risks and the liabilities on the shoulders of BCA, so we need to do some work around what that looks like. But is that something that we could be doing more of to help leverage additional funding into this region that wouldn't normally be achieved? And just an example, working with Tasman Environment Trust on the South Island, this is a core service they are now providing, and they're facilitating about $7 million worth of funding across 30 different projects through unconstituted groups currently. So that's a consideration that we will be discussing as a future role for ourselves. The other idea that we put forward is a discretionary fund, so a small fund with agreed outcomes from a regional council perspective that we could potentially administer with a low administration load on those groups. Administration support is a common thing that gets raised by our groups. We can't underestimate some of the administration time that is required. So we're playing a support role there. We're lucky to now have funding for an admin and support role within our own organisation, and that person is now delivering some support to groups. Things like building a website, which we can do essentially for free, integrating MailChimp into newsletters and setting them up on Xero as financial management platforms, simple things that we can do quickly that would be a real challenge for those volunteers. There's an increasing desire to meet treaty obligations across all sectors, and particularly in the conservation space. I think this is hugely important right now. And we're trying to play a role in supporting our groups to connect with hapu at place, at the local level, where there's common interests in various different projects, and looking at ways that we can help support those groups. But we're also looking at how we can build relationships at a BCA level. And really, you want to be looking for where there's common interests. And Bay Conservation Cadets for us seems to be that common interest. We're having a fantastic level of Māori applications to that programme. And we're now looking at how can we embed Māwhara Māori learning into that 12-week programme in a respectful and appropriate way. And the advice that we've been given is to actually include a noho marae experience, which we think would help build relationships for our member groups, the BCA, and provide quite a unique experience for the cadets and an opportunity for hapu to share their knowledge and their aspirations, and for us to all learn together. The reason we'd like to partner with you on that is that being a bigger entity than ourselves, you have resources internally in terms of your Māori engagement team, which we think we would really benefit from in being able to access and engage with. Training and capability building for volunteers is hugely key, and this seems to be a strength that we're building now with Bay Conservation Cadets, and the potential for us to use some of those models also to deliver to volunteers in the future. We already have resourcing to deliver 5 training or connector type events a year, and that ranges from things of training around GIS to EV engagement to having a celebration members event at the end of the year. Intergenerational pathways. This is, I guess, probably an area that we're hugely passionate about. Thank you for supporting our nature education program over the last 3 years, and we really hope to continue that relationship with you for this particular element. We've had a great response from schools. We have it, we deliver in very much a skill development perspective, and I spoke to you recently on this, so I won't share too much more on that today, but we believe that it's really important to equip our young people with the knowledge, confidence and skills to participate. Growing partnerships and new volunteer inputs. So we often sort of hear that concern of ageing volunteers. I sometimes wonder with an ageing population whether we need to worry about that too much, given that we will have more retirees coming through. And I think if we can market and sell and engage those people as they create time, there is a real opportunity there. But looking for other inputs as well. And I think the importance of working in together with other agencies like EnviroHub and New Zealand Landcare and yourselves and councils, and aligning and supporting as much as we can, and then looking at new inputs like corporates, as we shared the balance experience when we came to you last time. We've worked with Bottom School. I've got a meeting with Powerco in a couple of weeks. So looking at how can we engage other inputs into some of those volunteer outcomes, youth also. So we feel that we align with a number of your goals and outcomes, the key ones highlighted in front of you here. But I would just also like to say, let's not underestimate the value of investment that we achieve for social outcomes, also when we invest in volunteers and the environment. And I'd just like to say thank you for the support that you've provided to BCA today, and I look forward to our ongoing relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Now you can take a breath and we'll ask you some questions. So we've got Councillor Van Doddleston, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Clark.
I just want to declare a conflict of interest. I'm chair of Rotary Trust for the K Valley Wetlands, and we are a member organisation.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Thompson.
Blimey, Michelle and Julian, it only seems like yesterday. This was a twinkle in your eye, Julian, so congratulations. What an amazing story. I asked EnviroHub the same question I'm going to ask you. Can you describe the relationship you have with EnviroHub?
Yeah, I think over time we've now built a really clear understanding of each of our roles. So we have some common interests and aspirations, which is fantastic, and where we can partner together. And then we've recognised some of the areas that actually we have individual strengths in. And so I certainly see EnviroHub playing a stronger role in the urban context. We play a much stronger role in the community conservation group context. I see EnviroHub having a real strength in outfacing to the whole community, whereas I think we play much more of a role in a deeper relationship with the care groups and the conservation groups that we work with.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, your conservation cadets must be getting damnably close to the first graduation. How's that looking, and what are the prospects post-course?
Yeah, so they actually concluded last Thursday, so quite amazing that we've completed our first intake already. A number of them have some interviews or some potential contracts lined up, and others are now, starting their process of seeking employment. I mean, for me personally, still my fear is how quickly other Jobs for Nature programs are getting up and running, and perhaps a little bit slower than was anticipated, and therefore, how quickly those cadets are going to find employment. But a number of them have been picked up by our community conservation groups to do some short-term contract work, and I think that's fantastic. And one of the biggest things for me about developing the cadetship was let's make sure that it benefits our member groups, which is our primary purpose, and therefore we take a lot of work to our member group sites, and then members are recognising some skill sets and saying, actually, could we contract you for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, can I just add to that? This morning, I was out with one of the cadets in the wetland, and we were setting up some new possum traps. And after an hour or two working with him, I had to come in for our board meeting, but I left him to go on with the job. And I thought, wow, I just want this guy on board. You know, he had the knowledge and enthusiasm, and he's got possum trapping in his background, so that was helpful. But he just struck me, this is the sort of person we need working in the environment to make the leap forward, to go from being a little group that's doing quite nice things to the much bigger group that's doing really good things.
Thanks, Julian. Councillor Winters.
Michelle, same question I asked Youth Search and Rescue, your cadets. Do they come out with a qualification? You just talked about a graduation, so what's the qualification?
Yeah, so the cadetship in its entirety is not certified, but there are components within it that are. So they do a number of the core certificates that many jobs like being a dog ranger ask for. So they do road safe, they do outdoor first aid, they do liability to vehicle, they do chainsaw if it's going to be appropriate to them, or CSL if it's going to be appropriate to them. They're all NZQA certified.
Councillor Neves.
Thank you. Great presentation. I'm going to ask a similar question to Councillor Thompson, but with relation to the New Zealand Land Care Trust, because we've got a substantial submission for them for 3 years of funding also. And they are working with 9 plenty catchment groups. So how do you differentiate what you do with what they do? Is there any overlap and how do you work together?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's an area that we've been grappling with. So in talking to NZ Landcare, actually the challenges that those collectives as catchment groups are pretty much the same challenges that our kind of land management groups are facing, you know, the administration, the funding, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And as a board, we have talked about, okay, do we take on those catchment groups as well? Is that appropriate for BCA to take on? And that's something we're still sort of mulling, but in talking with NZ Landcare around the idea of them having a role that sat within their organisation, I think it does feel right, because they've got those kind of more unique sort of connections and relationships with private landowners and farmers and so on. But I see that there's real synergies in terms of, I think we should be teaming up to a degree if that role comes into place. I think some of our learnings we would share, or some of our support tools. We've already, to some of those catchment groups, for example, given our templates around health and safety. So I think anything we've developed, we should just share on.
Yeah, I think on that, for instance, Waikokapū, which I'm a member, that is that flows down through the Waihi Harbour Wildlife Management Reserve, which the Makatu Natural Wetlands Society manages on behalf of DOC. So there's inevitably going to be a working together on that sort of front, because we are contiguous in that respect.
But the focus is more with landowners that are coming together to do work across a geographical area where you're working with volunteer groups.
Correct. Correct, yes, so more private land focused is theirs generally.
Anything else, councillors?
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a small comment to you?
Yes, you can.
That we are asking you for your support, but we're actually asking you for your modest support so that we can multiply the value of that and spread it out across the region. And take some of the load off you and make it reduce the bureaucracy, you might say, to some extent, which I know is inevitable, and make it easier for the groups and for other groups to do. I say to bring the whole to take the Bay of Plenty region forward. I think we've shown that especially with the cadet program and the team that Michelle has built up herself. That we've really got the skills to go ahead, and we really appreciate your support in this area, because I think it will benefit you at the end of the day.
Thanks, Julian, and could I thank you both for your participation in today, but also the long ongoing work that you've had. And I think we shouldn't let your presentation to go today noted in that the participation of Minister Parker shortly after Christmas in terms of launching the Bay Conservation Cadets was essentially the forerunner in terms of what at Jobs for Nature level has become a prerequisite in terms of a component of training, minimise administration, get people out there doing stuff and train them so there's a future job market for them in the future. So thanks very much for that. And you've taken on your second intake?
Just started interviewing yesterday, so yesterday, this morning and Friday. Yeah.
How many another
And it
6?
starts on the 14th of May, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so another 10 people will start with us then.
Mr. Chairman, we had 81 applicants, I think.
Yeah, so that was double the applications to the first intake. And that was really without advertising other than social media and contacts and networks, not any formal job application adverts.
Okay, impressive. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Emma, would you like to come forward, please? And is Joel there? Sorry? Okay. Well, if you'd like to take the seat there, Emma, and before Joel gets here, I was going to suggest that because we really push for time at 4 p.m, we're losing 6 councillors. So it'd be really good if Joel and yourself could do a tag team, because I know from the submissions they're essentially the same.
Yes, yeah, we intended to be here together.
So why don't we give them a minute? Anything you'd like to talk to us about?
Well, I think the good thing is, Doug, we can probably cut to the chase, because since I first came here, and we've actually had lots of really good meetings and put in play a lot of actions, and things are definitely progressing. So I don't think that we need to go much into the history of, behind clear the air or anything like that. But I see a few faces. I'm happy to answer any questions before Joel arrives if anyone doesn't really know what the issue is that I'll be presenting on today. Does everyone feel that they know?
Yeah, I think we do. I'd just be interested, I'm not close enough, Emma, but I think what's it group you've got, the Clean Air Group, isn't it? It's facilitated.
Clear the Air.
Clear the Air. Is that working well?
Well, look, it's just growing organically. I think when I first came in, I had about 80 people, and now without me actually actively doing anything, I've got like close to 900 people that are participating actively on Facebook. And this is without doing any, email thing or anything, which a lot of people aren't on Facebook. So yeah, it's it touches every demographic, every, we represent workers, mums, dads, business owners, and yeah, so it's a real community initiative. So,
okay, thank you. Kia ora, Joel. Kia ora. What I was referring to, Emma, was the group that facilitated by Graham Marshall.
Oh, sorry, right. That's the working party that we have. We've had 3 meetings, and the most recent meeting was quite productive. I think Joel might agree that but we need to be more solutions focused. I think there is part of the problem is the sense of urgency, and but it is bringing everyone to the table, especially industry, for them to understand the sentiment in the community, which is very strong, and for them not to feel so much attacked, but to work with us to say how can we coexist. Because the reality is, we have chemical factories next to residents and schools and things like that, and we every day are suffering with bad air quality. It's a fact that we have a polluted airshed in the Mount industrial area. That's not up for discussion. It's a fact we have contaminated land sites and contaminated water in the Mount as well. So we're not, with regards to the air, it's every day, and it's urgent, and it's now. So although the working party is a good thing, Doug, it's also not quite enough. We think that the regional council needs to be more aggressive in terms of enforcement when there are breaches, and we need more monitoring, sure, but we know that there's a problem. So some of the things that we've requested for the long-term plan.
So Emma, just so Joel can catch up.
Hi, Joel.
So before you arrived, Joel, we were just waiting for you. So we sort of had a general, how's the lay of the land, but apologies, but at 4 o'clock, so you've essentially got 15 minutes, we're losing 6 of our councillors. So between ourselves and them, we thought we'd just cut straight to the chase, deal with the issues you want and deal with questions.
Ako te tōtai te mea te kia koutou, kai koini hira, ki te kōrero tahi koutou, me mate hoki o te hapori o maua me wharero, anō rea kia koutou a tēnā koutou. Apologies for being late. I was, I guess as councillors, you're fully aware of the contaminated site that is just at Water Chemical Solutions, and we had some of your staff and contractors at our marae, and we've been running around trying to make sure that our whānau was safe and kept alert and informed about what's going on. Which is, I guess, when you're talking climate change and you're talking about a long-term plan, then I guess we as in whareroa really question, well, what has been the plan to date? What was the previous plans from your council and your predecessors when it comes to our community? As of this week, although we've been, I guess, standing on our soapbox, leading to everybody to listen to us when we've said that our area is not only suffering from air pollution, but if it's in the air, it's in the moana, it's in the water, it's in the whenua. Unfortunately, people haven't been listening until tests have been conducted, which is where we are today. Again, so where does that leave our community moving forward? Where does that leave, I guess, the wider mount? Time will tell as the tests come forward, but I guess we need to be prepared for what that plan will be in terms of a long-term plan. For us, our submission was strongly based. If you're going to have any discussions around climate change, needs to, the regional planning must have the critical changes which are urgently required within our area in whareroa. Again, I revert back to the contaminated site, and that really confirms to us when we put out our strategic plan to not only yourselves, the City Council and the government, in terms of a 10-year managed retreat of all heavy industries away from the Mount Industrial area. It can't be said enough of the urgency, depending of, regardless of the testing in our area. No one in this room is able to control leaching of chemicals. So until someone's able to achieve that, then there needs to be drastic changes in how our operations have been planned in the past and planned moving forward. This is some of the things. I'll just quickly go over the things that I guess that we're requesting that councillors take into consideration with your plan. That we're suggesting that any climate change long-term plan has to include the lowering of national environmental standards within Mount Maunganuishi, as my fellow Mountie has referred to the airshed, and national air quality standards are not working, and they're not fit for purpose in our area, and they're not fit for purpose for a climate change action plan moving forward. Additional air quality monitoring stations by schools and residential areas, more funding to be directed to help the staff of Bay of Plenty Regional Council focus on this important issue. We've been asking for a moratorium on consents. Your staff and some councillors has indicated to us that that's unachievable. Well, everything's unachievable while we keep saying it's unachievable. I believe that we've got a lot of smart minds in this room, and people with a lot of influence, not only in this region, but across the country and down in Wellington, where you can push pause, sort out what the problem is, and then develop what that long-term plan is going to be. I guess should be no more highlight that than obviously with the PFAs in our soil. Stricter and more immediate enforcement when breaches of air quality, such as closures, to fine a big business like Balance $80,000 when they breached air quality standards is a smack in the face to us in the community when our kids have to breathe it and our grandparents are struggling to breathe.
A set timeline to permanently relocate heavy industry out of the Mount to a fit for purpose, proper heavy industrial zone where it can still service the port, your ports, and still continue to make great profits for your organisation. An economic study into the true economic cost of these heavy industrial sites on key valuable land for everybody in the Mount, in Tauranga and across the country. Funding directed to improve housing to be ring-fenced, not only for whareroa but other communities within the Mount that are having to deal with, I guess, the issues, not just with air pollution, but obviously we're going to find out what happens in the next few weeks with contamination of soil. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take questions, but for now I'll just pass it over to my friend here.
Also happy to take questions. I think it all speaks for itself, and the same issues affect the wider Mount community. We're all ring-fenced by heavy industry, and so yeah, happy to take questions.
Joel and Emma, questions, councillors?
I will just, jump in and say one thing. At the working party with the korero we're having with some of the industry guys there, some of them are very frank about them knowing that they need to be in an area where they can operate more effectively. They know that the time, but they want some certainty around that. So that point about setting a timeline gives business or industry some certainty. And so if we acknowledge that the days of heavy industrial activity in the Mount, like next to residents and schools, and that are limited, it needs to come to an end. Well, what does that look like? And businesses know that they would be able to operate more effectively in another area. So I think that's something to work with the TCC on, looking at the better vision for the Mount community with their long-term plan as well, looking at rezoning. These are things that it's done in cities all around the world. They've had to move ports, they've had to move tankers. We've done it in Auckland with the Wynyard Quarter. Big things can change, but we need brave people at the table to say, well, what does that look like? We know we've got industrial land not far from the Mount that some of these businesses could relocate to. It's achievable, but they need to be assisted, and perhaps it's some central government funding to do that. Perhaps it's a timeline. So, yeah.
No questions.
And then just lastly since we have till 4, like we did that last point about the economic study, like as a regional council, you're a massive machine, and it's just been steamrolling on with the port and big industry. But, when you look at the footprint in Mount Maunganui of 200 hectares plus taken up with tanks and trucks and containers and whatnot, and it's sitting on potentially the most valuable land in the country. So can't we just look at this footprint and say, well, some of that could be rezoned residential? I know that's a Tauranga City question now, but you guys need to work together and look after our air, land and water. By doing that, it must mean a bigger vision for what the Mount could look like. And a true study, you could actually be making more money, bringing in cleaner businesses, more innovative businesses that reach our carbon targets as well. So, but we do need some brave thinking. We need some leadership on this. But it's what the people want, ultimately. It's all been about business, industry and corporates. We need social, cultural and environmental factors brought to the table. Think of your grandkids here. This is what we're doing it for, really, at this point.
I guess if there's going to be no questions, then I'll take this time to talk about the current issue that's at hand with the PFAs in the whenua that's right next to us, and I'm guessing all of the councillors know. Obviously the great concern that it has for our community, but also then what is the impact and that's going to be for the wider community. talking to your experts or the consultants that at the marae today, when they're indicating that they expect the spread of PFAs to move upwards, well, between 2 and 3 kilometres, especially with, I guess, our water table, then there's a real concern here it shouldn't be just for us at Whairero and I guess the wider mount, but I guess those that have allowed this business and practice to be able to be placed next to marae and residential areas in the first place. So I really do implore the councillors to take this very seriously, just because we are. If you haven't been listening to us with the air quality, then I do strongly recommend that you listen to us now. There's testing to be had and there's results to come, and I'm sure we're all waiting for those. And believe me, no one is more eager or no one was more worried about what those results are than us sitting on this side of the fence when our families and our kids are the ones that are swimming in that water and that are playing on that and living on that land. So I don't know what your plan is, and I'm pretty sure you'll be waiting until you get the final results and what comes back from your consultants. But I do really stress to you, don't sit on it, don't try and hide it, get the full picture, just like what we've been asking for a long time now. And that's why we've been asking for a moratorium, is push pause, sort out what you've been giving consents, or your staff have been given consents for, understand the full picture of what's going on in this city that's being allowed to be developed and continue to operate under the banner of the getting consents of the regional council, and also understanding that a lot of these industries support the port that you are a major shareholder of, and I do implore you to have some take on a responsibility of fiduciary duty, albeit you're not board members, but you're councillors of the major shareholder of this port, which has major influence in the city, which just so happens to be our neighbour and is poisoning us. So please take that into consideration.
So, kia ora, Joel. I think some of your comments warrant some reply. So essentially, we are not in the business of hiding anything. The matter you're dealing with in terms of PFAS is not just an issue here that's relevant and it's new to your Orebi, but as you well know, it's been an issue that's been traversed Ohakia, Whenuapai. Essentially, the historical relationship has been with airfields, as you know as well, with the firefighting thing. So we're not in the business of hiding anything. The staff will work through this process, and I understand that you were party or someone from Marae had a session with staff last weekend, and we intend to keep that dialogue up. And as the information arrives, we'll keep putting it in front of you. It's of equal interest to us. But there's councillors who haven't had the opportunity. The MFE website is really good in terms of the history of PFAS, the effect on humans. And the reality is that as consumers, doesn't matter who you are, the way in which PFAS has been applied, used, consumed, surprised me. And I think you find out it's in cosmetics, it's in greaseproof paper, it's a component of non-stick fry pans. This is the day-to-day usage that PFAS, I don't know when it was developed, has been applied to. But I think it is from recent experience, essentially in the matter of two in Auckland, is the issues, and I don't know whether it emanated from use of airfield here, has essentially been as a firefighting foam, or it's a component that spreads the foam out. So, yeah, we're not going to hide anything.
Yep.
Full disclosure, mate.
Cheers for that, Chair. I guess, I will I'll probably reword that in terms of not questioning, I guess, the council hide anything. But if you take it from me as someone who lives in Whairero or actually who has been forced to leave Whairero because our kids were getting sick because of the consents that have been passed from your council, then it is very difficult to be able to, I guess what I'm saying is I want to hold faith in you as councillors when you are holding the keys to the health and well-being of our whānau and community. And yes, I am fully aware of the, I guess, the other incidents of PFAS in other areas, because that's my whānau down in Rangitaine or Wairau, in Blenheim and Woodburn. So thank you.
Good. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Right, councillors, that brings our hearings for today to a conclusion. So, Joan, so we're adjourning till tomorrow. What time in Rotorua? Whakatane. No, sorry, my apologies for tomorrow. Stuart and I are apologies for tomorrow. We've got National Council, so you chairing it, James? Yes, both. So once again, I'll adjourn the meeting until what time? 1 p.m. tomorrow at Whakatane. Thank you, councillors. Those councillors who are leaving us, you're going to miss out on a Chardonnay, I think.